Why you should never share your personal life, not even with someone who says they love you. Some lessons only come after you've been silently betrayed. You trusted someone. You opened up from the heart. You shared your plans, your pain, your most intimate dreams. With someone who said they loved you, felt safe. But without realizing it, you handed over the keys to your emotional peace to someone who wasn't even mature enough to guard their own words. And now, what was sacred to you has become gossip in someone else's conversation. They judged you, labeled you, and worst of all, they used it all against you. What no one ever told you, and what I'm about to show you, is that the biggest mistake wasn't trusting. It was oversharing. Because there's a hidden cost to exposing your personal life. The cost of comparison, judgment, and emotional manipulation. And yes, even someone who says they love you can end up being your biggest saboteur. Not out of cruelty, but out of insecurity, jealousy in disguise, or ego. This video isn't here to make you paranoid. It's here to wake you up. Because there's one powerful truth that could change how you protect yourself from now on. The less people know about your life, the stronger you become. And starting now, you're going to understand exactly why silence is your best defense. And why keeping things to yourself isn't coldness, it's emotional intelligence. So get ready, because what you're about to hear will make you rethink every word you've been giving away. People smile, but they judge. It's strange how people can seem so warm, so curious, so genuinely interested. Yet behind those friendly eyes, there's often a mind quietly analyzing, measuring, and judging every detail of what you share. And here's the dangerous part. It's not always out of malice. Sometimes it's pure insecurity. Your courage reminds them of their fears. Your ambition makes them feel stuck. And the more you talk about your personal life, the more ammunition you give to people who silently collect your vulnerabilities like cards up their sleeve. In many cases, this judgment doesn't come from enemies. It comes from co-workers, family members, even those who swear they're rooting for you. They listen, yes, but not to understand, they listen to compare. It's like every piece of your story becomes a warped mirror where they see their own lives and feel exposed. Jealousy isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in fake advice, harmless jokes, or that awkward silence after you share something that matters. What seemed like support turns into comparison. And from comparison, judgment is born. The problem is, when you overshare, you're not just building connection. You're giving away control. Control over how people see you, talk about you, or interpret your actions when you're not around. That weakens your emotional boundaries. And slowly, your inner strength starts getting eaten away by doubts that were never yours. Doubts planted by side comments, judgmental looks, or curious questions. You might think you're being open, but sometimes you're just exposing your truth to people who are emotionally unfit to handle it. Want a practical example? When someone shares a new plan, starting a business, changing careers, walking away from a toxic relationship, the response isn't always encouragement. Sometimes it's sarcasm. Are you sure? Right now? Don't you think that's a bit much? That's the mask of support, hiding judgment and envy. That's why keeping your private life in a sacred space is a form of self-defense. It's not about being secretive. It's about knowing that discretion is a powerful tool for personal power. You're not hiding your life. You're protecting your progress. And that's the key to the next step. Understanding that oversharing, even with people who seem trustworthy, might be the very thing holding back your growth. Because what you say, others interpret. And their interpretation isn't always fair. But before we dive into that invisible risk, it's time to ask yourself something deeper. Who really deserves access to your inner world? Because if even a compliment can hide competition, imagine what they'll do with your fears. Oversharing might be a mistake. There's this silent belief that sharing is always a good thing. That opening your heart makes you more human, more connected, closer to others. But here's an uncomfortable truth. The more you talk about your life, the more power you give away. Sounds harsh, I know. But the reality is that too much exposure creates too much interference. What you say stops being yours, it becomes public domain. A detail you shared without thinking turns into hidden judgment. A dream they misunderstood becomes a doubt that circles right back to you. And the cruelest part, the person doesn't even need to have bad intentions to mess you up. Sometimes they just have the wrong mindset. They lack emotional maturity, self-awareness, or even the willingness to see you grow. Suddenly, your vulnerability becomes an open room where anyone walks in, gives their opinion, twists your words, and you're left trying to clean up the emotional mess caused by too much outside input. That's why too much trust slowly turns into decision paralysis. Talking too much can delay your journey, sabotage your clarity, and drain your energy. Sharing too early also throws off your rhythm. You get excited about something new, thinking that sharing it will give you more strength. And what do you get? Cold shower. Comments like, "That's risky. Haven't you tried that before? I know someone who did that, and it didn't work out." It all sounds like advice, but it's really just their fear being projected onto you. That kind of emotional manipulation weakens your confidence and messes with your intuition. You start doubting yourself because of someone else's doubt. And that pulls you away from your truth. When you keep what you're building to yourself, you protect the process. That's the value of building in private. That's where a growth mindset thrives. That's where you get to experiment, fail, adjust, and evolve, without an audience, without pressure, without competition. Want a practical tip? Take your goals and write them down just for you. Create a personal doc, review it every Sunday, track your progress in silence. That builds focus, discipline, inner clarity. Progress needs space. And that space is found in silence. Because silence is power. And if you thought this was just about inner peace, think again. You need to understand what happens when the very words you spoke in a moment of trust end up in the wrong hands and are used against you. That's what we'll explore next. Because silence isn't hiding, it's strategic self-protection. Once your words are out there, you no longer control what people do with them. Silence is a superpower. There's a powerful force in silence that most people overlook. We live in a world where everyone wants to be heard, but very few understand the value of staying quiet. Silence is where the magic of growth happens. It's where you truly listen to yourself, without interference, without noise, without comparison. When you choose silence, you create a sacred space. And it's not passive, it's strategic. Because while others are distracted trying to prove something, you're in there, evolving with focus and purpose. Think of a seed. Before it blossoms, it needs darkness, soil, time. Your growth works the same way. You need privacy to test things, to fail, to adjust, without the outside world trying to decide whether you're fast enough, good enough, or going in the right direction. Silence gives you the freedom to fail without judgment, to change your mind without having to explain yourself. It gives you space to rebuild your identity, your financial mindset, your career path, without the fear of seeming inconsistent. After all, growth requires breaking away from who you used to be. That's the value of moving in silence. When you don't share everything you're doing, you don't trigger resistance. You avoid distractions. You stop other people's expectations from messing with your path. Silence brings clarity. Silences ego, vanity, the need to impress. And in its place, it brings focus, strategy, and continuous learning. Want a practical example? Instead of posting your plans, record your insights for yourself. Write them down. Record a voice note you can listen to later. That's growth. That's emotional intelligence in action. Some people mistake silence for weakness. But in reality, it's the opposite. Silence takes strength. Quiet strength. Self-control. Personal responsibility. It's you at the helm of your own ship saying, "I don't need validation to keep moving forward." Silence is also where creativity is born. It's where ideas come without pressure, without comparison. When you quiet the world, you finally hear your intuition. And when you hear your intuition, you get closer to what truly belongs to you. But all of this loses meaning if you don't realize what can happen when you trust too much, talk too much, and your words are turned against you. Because even when you believe you're surrounded by good intentions, the truth is, people are flawed. And in the next part of this journey, you'll see how even someone who loves you can, without meaning to, become the messenger of your downfall. Your words can be used against you. It might sound dramatic to say your own words can be used against you. But it happens all the time in homes, in companies, in friendships. You speak from the heart, believing your words will be held with care. And weeks later, you find out your private moment became a conversation topic in a room you weren't even invited to. That's not a theory, that's reality. People have very selective memory. They forget your progress, but they remember every mistake. And they hold on to those, not as lessons but as ammunition. The worst part: that weapon almost never comes from strangers. Most of the time it's held by someone you trusted. Sometimes they don't even mean to hurt you, but they do anyway. Other times it's subtle. A sarcastic comment, a little jab, an uncomfortable reminder. That private confession you thought would stay between you two turns into an argument starter, a reason for judgment, or an excuse to downplay how far you've come. Your vulnerability becomes fuel in the mouth of someone who wasn't mature enough to protect it. Want a clear example? Someone saw you at your lowest. They heard you say you were broke, lost, exhausted. You were vulnerable. Months later, you've turned things around. You've grown, changed habits, started a side hustle, made investments. But during the first disagreement, they say, "You didn't even know what to do with your life just a few months ago." And just like that, one sentence throws your entire personal growth into question. What was once trust turns into a weapon. What was once openness becomes recycled pain. That drains your energy and makes you pull back. That's why confidentiality is a luxury. And it has to be earned. You don't just hand over the keys to your emotional world to anyone. That's part of elevated self-awareness. You observe, you test, you trust in stages. You learn to read the signs. Who interrupts you, who changes the subject, who makes jokes about the things you say seriously. Vulnerability isn't the issue. The issue is who you share it with. It's not about shutting yourself off from the world. It's about developing the wisdom to choose who truly deserves access to your inner world. And once you realize that not every smile is a safe space, you start to see the world through a different lens. You realize not every kind word is sincere. Some tell me everything. Invitations are just curiosity dressed up as empathy. And that brings us to the next point. The illusion of support. That feeling of being surrounded by caring people. When in truth, many are just sitting front row, waiting for the next act in your life to unfold. The illusion of support. Not everyone who asks, "How are you?" actually wants to know. Sometimes that question is just a polite cover to cross your boundaries. It's hard to admit that, but it's necessary. Because one of the most common types of people today are those who pretend to care just to collect information. They smile, they listen, they ask thoughtful questions. But inside they're taking mental notes. They don't want to support you. They just want to know how far you're going. And how much that threatens where they're still stuck. These people don't carry signs. They don't show up as villains. They come disguised as allies. But deep down, your progress makes them uncomfortable. Your growth forces them to face their own limitations. And jealousy, even the quiet kind, is heavy. Doesn't shout, but you feel its weight. It shows up as advice, concern, or the classic, "I'm just trying to help." And before you know it, that toxic energy starts to cloud your focus, your decisions, your confidence. The support you let in begins to cost you, silently. Need an example? You start taking better care of your health, changing habits, cutting excess. The person who used to see you as their partner in bad habits now feels threatened. So what do? They make jokes about your new lifestyle. Call you too fitness. Say you've changed. That's not humor. It's an attempt to shake your self-trust. It's emotional sabotage disguised as friendship. The same thing happens when you start a new project, launch a business, or shift your money mindset. That's when you find out who truly supports you, and who just tolerated your light. The truth is, not every "I'm here for whatever you need" is real. Sometimes that fake support exists just to keep you within reach. Predictable, manageable, under control. That's why selective sharing becomes a powerful self-protection tool. You choose carefully who gets in, who stays, and who knows what. Because when real growth begins, you need a clean environment. emotionally clean. One that doesn't question your evolution at every turn. One that doesn't poison your progress with sweet-sounding sabotage. And that brings up the most important question. Who are you sharing your truth with? Because the next step in your journey demands more than affection. It demands discernment. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. How to choose who truly deserves to hear your story. Because trust isn't an open door. It's a key handed over with intention. Discernment before you share. There's an emotional trap that many people fall into without realizing it, believing that everyone who gets close has good intentions. The truth. Not everyone is ready or worthy to know your truth. Trust isn't a consolation prize. It's a slow, intentional process, built brick by brick with integrity, consistency, and observation. You need to look at how someone handles their own life before handing them pieces of yours. Because if they don't have the emotional balance to manage themselves, they won't have the maturity to handle your vulnerability either. Discernment starts with the small things. It's how someone reacts to others' mistakes. How they speak about people who aren't in the room. How they handle their own discomfort. People who spread stories don't know how to hold silence. And yes, your story needs silence. Needs protection. That's not coldness, it's self-respect. If someone calls you cold for not oversharing, it probably means they're used to having easy access to unguarded people. Setting clear psychological boundaries is one of the greatest expressions of personal power. And to develop that discernment, you need to learn to observe more than you listen. Words are seductive, but actions reveal the truth. The person who listens to you today could be the same one laughing about your secrets at a coffee table tomorrow. Not because they hate you, but because they don't have the emotional structure to treat trust as something sacred. That's why developing self-awareness and emotional intelligence isn't just about growth. It's about protecting what you're building. Want a practical example? Before you open up to someone, ask yourself a few silent questions. Does this person respect other people's boundaries? Or do they constantly cross lines with jokes, sarcasm, or just being honest? Do they value confidentiality? Can they listen without judging? Do they show real empathy, or just curiosity? These answers don't show up quickly. They reveal themselves over time, through shared experiences and consistent behavior. And the more you train this awareness, the better you filter and the less you suffer. Because what comes after you share with someone who lacks this foundation can be costly. And sometimes the cost isn't money, it's peace. And believe me, protecting your peace is far more valuable than any momentary validation. That's why the next step is crucial. Learning how to protect your energy and progress from the emotional traps created by overexposure. Because not everyone will attack you, but many will distract you. And distraction is one of the most subtle forms of sabotage. Protect your energy and your progress. Not every attack comes with a scream. Sometimes it comes dressed as a compliment, as an innocent question, as an unsolicited piece of advice. And that's where the real danger lives. When you share too much, you open the door to disguised interference. What should have been a moment of excitement becomes an emotional minefield. Protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's personal responsibility. It's you stepping up as the guardian of your own journey. It's shielding your path from distractions, opinions, and expectations that don't belong to you. Progress, especially in the beginning, is fragile. It's like a spark. One little blow, a doubt, a criticism, a jealous comment, can extinguish what's just starting to grow. That's why building in silence isn't weakness. Strategy. It's building in private. It's understanding that some things only bloom in the dark. Want an example? Let's say you start a new habit. You begin waking up earlier, studying more, investing. You get excited and share it. And someone says, "I doubt that'll last." Now, in addition to your internal effort, you're also fighting someone else's external prediction. And that prediction is heavy, because it gets in your head and slowly erodes your self-trust. You start doubting not because you have doubts, but because someone else planted theirs in your mind. That's toxic energy. And the danger, the subtle but powerful, doesn't shout. It creeps in, shifting your emotions, pulling you off center. So what's the best defense? Selective sharing. Say less, protect more. Create a space where your growth doesn't need applause, only consistency. Here's a practical tip to protect your progress. Schedule time for silence. It might sound simple, but it works. Use a part of your day to reconnect with your goals, without social media, without outside voices. Write down where you're improving, what still needs work, and celebrate your small wins with yourself. This builds emotional regulation, strengthens goal clarity, and reduces your need for outside approval. You become your own support system, and that's a kind of strength no one can take from you. Now, if you've already realized that oversharing drains your energy, you're going to connect even more with what's coming next. Why real focus never walks hand in hand with the urge to show everything. The world claps for what it sees, but what truly transforms you happens far from the spotlight and far from judgment. And that's exactly where true focus begins. Focus over flash. Some people spend more time talking about what they're going to do than actually doing it. And it's more common than you think. There's an addictive illusion in sharing plans. It gives us the feeling that we're making progress just because we said something out loud. But that feeling is deceiving. Talking about your goals gives your brain a quick dopamine hit, a burst of pleasure that tricks you. It makes you feel like you're already on your way, even though you haven't even started. That's called false productivity. And the worst part, steals your real focus. While you're busy trying to impress, your actual progress slips away. Because to build something meaningful, a purpose-driven career, a new money mindset, a project that builds long-term value, you need focus and execution. And that doesn't fit into social media posts or casual conversations. What fits there is performance. But performance doesn't change your life. Consistency does. It's what you do when no one's watching. The spotlight drains energy from the backstage. And without the backstage, there's no show. Real focus requires silence. It requires dedicated time to create, mess up, fix, and restart without an audience. You want growth. Set goals. You want results. Build routines. You want transformation. Build a system. Quiet system. How? Choose 3 weekly priorities and protect your time like your life depends on it. Study, execute, review, all in silence. Want to invest? Study assets. Look into companies like Nubank, XP, or real estate funds. Want to change your reality? Start acting like someone who already knows that true success doesn't shout. Acts. Choosing to keep your process private also helps reduce anxiety. Because when you share your goals too early, you're not just opening up. You're creating an audience. And that audience watches, questions, gives opinions, and expects. All of that adds pressure. Pressure creates noise. And noise clouds your clarity. That's how you drift from your original path and start walking in circles, trying to prove you're doing great. Even if, deep down, you feel lost. The secret: hold it. Stay quiet. Refine in silence. And when silence becomes your natural mode of operation, something powerful happens. You start trusting yourself more, and relying less on other people's opinions. You realize you don't need a stage to grow. And that kind of self-confidence, built quietly, prepares you for the next step. Because now that you understand the power of not talking, it's time to embrace the strength of solving things on your own. With courage. Alone. Because the foundation of every transformation starts with your ability to face your own battles, without depending on anyone to do it for you. Self-confidence is essential. Self-confidence isn't about thinking you're invincible. It's about knowing that even when you're broken, you can rebuild. It's when you stop looking to others for the answers, and start digging within yourself to find what you need. It's not easy, but it changes everything. Because the more you rely on others to fix your life, the weaker you become. And that puts you in a cycle of emotional dependence that robs you of your freedom, your clarity, and your peace. When you don't trust yourself, you live at the mercy of other people's approval. Solving your own problems builds a rock-solid foundation of self-reliance. It's like lifting weights. The more you train, the stronger you get. And that strength doesn't stay in the body, it moves into your mind. Helps you make decisions, set goals, handle pressure. Want a real-world example? Next time you're in crisis, don't rush to vent. Sit down. But reflect. What are you feeling? What can you do about it? What would your solution be if no one else could help? That simple exercise activates your emotional intelligence and puts you back in control. And when you take back that control, something becomes crystal clear. You already have what you need. You may not have all the answers yet, but you've got tools. You've got creativity. You've got resilience. And best of all, you can learn. You can grow. You can build new skills. You can invest in financial education, explore digital tools, or take a side hustle course in your free time. Independence is built through action. And every action makes you stronger. Because true confidence doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing you can learn anything. The side effect: healthier relationships. When you no longer depend on others for your emotional stability, you stop overwhelming them, and you stop being so easily disappointed. You understand that loving someone doesn't mean turning them into your emotional crutch. That's where balance is born. You enter relationships out of love, not out of need. And that changes everything. Balanced relationships thrive. They don't suffocate. They don't drain. They elevate. You begin to surround yourself with people who celebrate your strength, not feed off of it. And that strength, built from the inside out, is what prepares you for the final realization. Silence isn't weakness. It's maturity. It's respect for everything you've built in silence. Everything you overcame without applause. And everything you're about to show without needing to explain. Because when you understand the value of your journey, you stop rushing to tell it. You wait for the results. And results, my friend, they speak for themselves. Success is the best response. There comes a moment when you stop arguing, justifying, or explaining yourself. You simply act. And let the results speak for you. Because in the end, people don't respect promises. They respect proof. Real success doesn't need captions. Has presence. Has power. And more than that, it silences even the loudest critics. When you achieve what others once doubted, there's nothing left to prove. You look back, see the quiet path you walked, and smile, because you know what it took to get there. That's why silence isn't the absence of something. It's the presence of focus. It's you choosing to protect your journey, your energy, your vision. It's understanding that even a single word spoken at the wrong time can disrupt something that was just beginning to grow. Success is the voice of those who had patience. It's the harvest of those who knew how to wait. So when you guard your private life, you're not isolating yourself. You're preserving yourself. And in the process, you learn something most people spend a lifetime ignoring. Not everyone deserves access to you. It's not about hiding, it's about selecting. And when you choose wisely, you gain something rare: peace. True peace doesn't come from people's approval. It's born from a clean inner world. One that's cared for. One that's not cluttered with emotional mess left behind by other people's opinions. That's where success grows strong. Without outside pressure, you make mistakes freely. You win naturally. You grow with authenticity. And suddenly, what you built in silence begins to make noise. Not because you announced it, but because the results became too powerful to ignore. That's the moment when you finally realize life doesn't have to be a stage. It can be a lab, garden, a battlefield. Whatever it is, it needs to be yours. Personal, authentic, rooted in your truth. And that truth doesn't need spotlights. It needs roots. And do you know what feeds those roots? The conscious decision to live with self-respect, emotional boundaries, and focus. Choosing silence doesn't mean you're hiding your greatness. It means you're honoring it. And when the time is right, it'll shine without effort. Now tell me, isn't it freeing to know you don't have to explain yourself to anyone? That you can walk your journey in peace while the world screams for attention? That you can grow without showing off? Love without depending? Win without announcing? Yeah. But to get there, first you need to understand one thing. Privacy is power. And that's what this final message is all about. A reminder that protecting your peace has never been weakness. It's always been wisdom. So let me ask you, how many times have you felt drained after sharing too much? How many times have you regretted trusting too early, speaking when you didn't need to, giving away what should have stayed just yours? How many times did you turn your personal life into a stage, hoping for applause but getting judgment? The truth is, your peace was never meant to be auctioned off. Your journey isn't content. Your progress isn't a soap opera. And you don't owe explanations to anyone who isn't willing to respect you in silence. So ask yourself, will you keep handing over the keys to your emotional peace to the wrong people? Or are you finally ready to protect what you're building? Will you keep chasing approval? Or let your results speak for you? It's time to use your silence as your armor, to turn your privacy into your shield, to honor your story with discernment, not with exposure. Because now you know privacy is power, silence is strength, and discretion is one of the purest forms of freedom. Direct hit if this message spoke to you, if it opened your eyes, brought you clarity. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what are you going to keep just for yourself from now on? What decision are you going to make quietly? And of course, hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, and stick around. In every video, you'll learn more about how to protect your progress, your peace, and most importantly, your essence.